Hello.
Hi, good morning,
Hi.
or good afternoon for you, I suppose.
Um, Good. Let me just to my headset. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
Awesome. Great.
this
Cool.
sounds good. This is an upgrade from
Yeah.
last time.
Yeah.
Oh man, so that
Yeah.
was this whole thing. I that conversation with you was actually the first symptom of my phone just like kind of going wacko. And it turns out
Oh.
that I had one of the iPhone 7s that had been recalled. And it was this
Oh.
whole thing, yeah. So I ended up having to replace my phone, but it was dropping calls. I couldn't get
Oh shit.
signal, and it just happened to happen for the first time while we were having our conversation. So my
Yeah,
apologies for
of
that.
course. No worries. No worries. Well, I hope that that we don't get any weirdness because like sometimes my internet I live in like a dead zone actually. It's like
Oh,
literally like in this like
in
there's like three
Seattle?
or four houses. Yeah, where like the internet's a little iffy and like the networks kind of suck. So I'm like, great. I'm so glad I'm in this dead zone.
That's so weird. I didn't
Yeah.
know that there were
Anyway.
those in cities
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's like, yeah. Oh well. Um,
Well, we're back. It's sounding
we're
good.
back.
Yeah.
Yes. Awesome.
I thought we could start with a couple questions that I had, or just clarifications rather, that I wanted to make. I was actually listening through our first episode this morning, and just a couple quick things I want to clarify. And then mostly today, I want to dive into listener questions that we didn't get to in our first conversation. And
Okay.
there's some really good ones. There's some stuff that I think we completely covered, but I would be curious to hear if you had any additional thoughts. And then there's some really good questions that we didn't cover that I think will be really valuable. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's kind of what I'm having in mind. Do you have a timeline today?
Nope. I
Okay,
left it pretty open. Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. Same as last
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been really valuable stuff. I'm excited to get into it.
Awesome.
Yeah, my first question was about the J curl, and we talked about it pretty extensively, but something that was interesting that you said that I wish I'd asked a question about was that if you go too heavy with it, like you can go pretty heavy with the J curl and almost treat it like a training exercise, but if you go too heavy, it might inhibit your neurological ability to improve your flexibility. And I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit more, and maybe if you have any recommendations, like as far as numbers, don't go above a certain percentage of body weight or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the J curl, like you said, it can be used as a strength exercise, and I think especially for um, like competitive powerlifters, I've seen some really big powerlifters who will do very heavy J curls, and their goal is to improve that strength in a flexed spine. So not necessarily for them, it's flexibility. So for us, we're like using this as a modality to improve both strength and flexibility. We do have to find kind of that sweet spot. And in the beginning, I think it's really important just to stick with body weight so that you understand the movement first and that there's no hesitation in the movement, because I think the second that you start to add external weight, there's probably thoughts in your mind of like, oh, I'm going to do something bad to my back.
Mm.
So we don't want any of those things in our mind when we're really doing a movement kind of like complex like this. And then like I would say like literally like over like months and even years, you can really start to add quite a bit of weight that will lead you to even bigger gains in flexibility and strength. And, unfortunately, like, I don't know if there's really like a percentage. I've heard some people talk about, so Ido Portal, like he was kind of the first person who introduced me to the J curl like 10 years ago, I think. And he said, to try to work up to 50% body weight.
Okay.
So like, I think that would probably be like the gold standard in terms of like, oh, you have decent spinal strength and it's enough to kind of get you flexible. But the caveat is that if you use a weight that is a little bit too heavy for your system, then you're not going to go as deep as you probably could if you just lightened up that weight a little bit. So some of it is just like progression, like go slow, like every couple of weeks, maybe add 5 pounds and just see how that changes. And I think for those who deadlift a lot and who feel very confident in their spine could probably start off using, 10, 15 pounds. And then over a couple months, like you'll see probably you might be able to double that in like just a couple months. So how you feel that, like you'll just be able to tell, like if you go in body weight, sometimes body weight for very tight people won't be enough external load to pull you into a new range. But for folks like if you're like, oh, I can like touch my toes in a regular J curl with no external weight, and then I hold 10 pounds and now I can't actually reach my toes anymore, then that's an indication that that weight is too heavy. So
interesting.
Then just back it off.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That's super helpful. And for context for listeners, because it's so tempting to, want to do more always, to have that feeling that you're making progress and to be adding weight. But for me, I think I started off with a 4-pound bar. It was like this weighted bar that they had at the gym. And I just used that, I think it was at least weeks, and it might've been more than a month. And I think I was just adding like a 5-pound plate at a time to the bar. And I think I worked up to like an empty 45-pound weightlifting bar, but it was like 6 months, I think, to make that kind of progress. And I think I experienced exactly what you're talking about. I think there was a time when I kind of pushed it a little too far or went a little too heavy, and I felt like the added tightness and couldn't relax at the bottom of the range as much. So that's really interesting to hear. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. I think that's a good way to maybe describe the feeling at the bottom of the J curl. Like you should be able to relax and breathe and not feel like you're shaking or like holding back. And another symptom could be like that you're tighter actually the next day.
Okay.
So that could be also just like a result of too heavy too soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a question I had too. Like once someone advances with their weight a little bit, like let's say someone works up to getting to a point where they have like an empty Olympic lifting bar, like 45 pounds, would you still recommend doing like a warm-up set at body weight or anything? Or is it okay to just jump right into whatever current weight that you're at?
Yeah. Well, I really like the bodyweight J curl actually as kind of like the daily movement, like your daily medicine, so like it's a really nice check-in to see where your spine is that day as well. But yeah, if you're like lifting heavy, so like I've been able to work up to 100-pound J curl.
Damn.
And like I am not starting with 100 pounds,
Okay.
I am starting with like, I generally like to start with the bar. So that's like a little less than 50%. I feel very confident with the bar. So like maybe whatever weight that you've been working up to, maybe start with like 50%, and then over maybe 2 to 3 sets, you start to increase that weight. I generally do about 5 sets of like 3 reps. That's like my very standard J curl programming. Yeah.
That's really good to know. I remember you saying that you recommended like a single set of 10, but I think that was starting at just body weight.
Yeah.
Okay. So once you go heavier, maybe more sets, less reps.
Yes.
And building the weight up each time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because like, again, it's like kind of like we do want to treat it more like a strength and range move.
Okay.
So sticking to more of the strength protocols. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you for all that. That's incredibly helpful. I had another question from our last conversation about passive stretching, and I've talked a little bit about Pavel Tsatsouline on the show before. Specifically, he's the guy, this Russian guy that brought the kettlebell over to the States, and he's really incredibly strong and is known for teaching people how to get strong. He's the founder of Strong First, but he can also do the side splits, like a full side splits, and he's really good at teaching people how to become more flexible. And one thing that I remember learning from a podcast with him that I was curious to get your thoughts on. He talks about during passive stretching, like let's say if I'm in a side split, like I'm standing up working on my side splits, he talks about making space and really, not just sitting in one static position, but really like kind of wiggling your butt side to side, moving your hips around, really like exploring the space in those joints as part of that passive stretch. What are your thoughts on adding subtle movement like that to a stretch versus just hanging out in one static position?
Yeah, I think that once you can comfortably sit in certain positions, so like the pancake, for example, like I think that the pancake is, sorry, my dog is going insane because there's a mailman, mail person. So like the pancake, it's really difficult for most people to move the pelvis around. And like once you can kind of like get relaxed in that position, I think it is imperative to be able to move the pelvis, like especially posterior and anterior tilt. So you're just like moving your pelvis forward and back, because like that integration, or like that, we tend to not separate the pelvis from the rest of our body. We're just like, somehow the pelvis gets stuck in these positions. So I think like the creating space, like what I'm thinking more about is like, can we disassociate our hips from the rest of our leg and our torso? And like, I think that is probably very good, especially for transferring over to athletic movements. So I think that is a great like next step. Like maybe some people can start to move their pelvis in the side split. Like I couldn't for a while. Like the pancake was really hard for me to move my pelvis around, even in the elevated position that we talked about. Now I feel like I can have some movement and start to like kind of create like circles and things like that. And actually Kit Lachlan, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's in Australia. Awesome. Like his whole thing is actually like how to get flexible as an adult. And he's definitely like one of my mentors who I've like learned a lot of this stuff from. And he has like a whole YouTube video on how to move the pelvis in the pancake position. So that might be a good one for people to watch.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with his stuff. I'll link to, I'll find that and I'll link to it in the show notes for people.
Yeah.
I guess this will be a follow-up. So yeah, I'll put it somewhere. I'll put it in probably right there in the podcast app. I'll link to it, but yeah. Okay. Kit Lachlan, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I've got some listener questions that I think we can dive into. The first one's from AJ, and AJ is a medical professional, and he had some really good questions. The first one, I'll actually ask a couple of them since we covered part of this, but I'd love to get your thoughts. So he wrote, what are the most important joints or movements for climbing athletes to have, quote, adequate mobility or flexibility? And is there an easy assessment that we can do at home that she advises or recommends to determine whether we have adequate flexibility? For people to check in with themselves, and what is adequate? Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed that teaser of this week's follow-up. If you want full access to follow-ups, you can sign up for $5 a month on Patreon at patreon.com/thenuggetclimbing. Or you can go to thenuggetclimbing.com and click on the support the podcast button at the top. If you're on your smartphone, just tap those two little lines at the top of the page and you'll see the button in the drop-down menu. $5 per month gets you access to all follow-up calls, past and future. As long as you are a member, you'll have access to all of them. As you just heard in the teaser, I've been recording some follow-up conversations with past guests on the show to talk about what they've been up to lately and to go even further into the weeds on a specific topic than we typically would on the podcast. Follow-ups are 20 to 30 minutes in length, occasionally longer, and I will be releasing one every other week to make sure I always have plenty of podcast guests to follow up with. If you sign up for follow-up calls, what you are really doing is supporting the regular podcast and helping me continue to chase down interesting guests so I can pick their brains and bring you new nuggets every week. And by signing up on Patreon, you get some bonus content to look forward to as well. In addition to getting access to follow-ups, I will also let you know who's coming up on the show, and you can submit patron questions for upcoming guests, as you have undoubtedly heard in other episodes of the podcast. $5 per month. Think of it as buying me a beer at the local brewery after a long day of climbing. Whether or not you choose to sign up, thank you for listening, and feel free to share the podcast with your friends or leave a rating on your listening app. It truly helps, and I appreciate you for tuning in. I am very grateful for you guys. Much love to you all. We'll see you next time.
Move with the rhythm. Shake it up, stop when the clock hits 13. Sing 1, 2, 3, 4. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.